Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this edition of Voice of CIO. We are doing a little bit different today because of a person whom I met short while and he had some thoughts to it. Let's first hear from Michel Fulton. Thanks, Mike, for joining us today and tell us about your background and tell us what we're going to be doing today.
Hi, Suresh. Good to see you again.
Right.
So my background, I am the Vice President of Product Strategy and Innovation at Expedient. Expedient is a US-based cloud provider, infrastructure as a service. And I joined Expedient back in October and have been there really brought in to help reestablish and improve the company's innovation processes, their product portfolio, and bring voice of customer throughout the organization. I also am an academic director and adjunct professor at Ohio State, where I teach all things digital. And prior to joining Expedient, I have about 30 years of experience in the IT industry. 5 years or 4 years at Nationwide, where I helped lead technology strategy and innovation. I spent a couple of years at CC&C Solutions, which is where you and I met each other, where I was their chief digital officer and the president of the Americas division for CC&C. And then prior to that, Procter & Gamble. Spent 20 years at Procter & Gamble. I was the chief cloud architect and the chief shared services architect, among many other roles at P&G. So it's been a long, fun journey, and I'm excited to share the voice of the CIO stage with you here today.
So one of the things that happened, Mike, was you were talking about there's a lot of IT myth busters that exist today. So we thought based on our conversation, we should start a specific edition, which is called the IT myth busters. So are you ready up for the first challenge?
I am ready for whatever you're going to throw at me.
Okay, so let's kick start. So you did mention as your role within Expedient, you do a lot of from an innovation standpoint. And as a CEO or managing director of TaUB Solutions, I run the business hat. I'm trying to play the role of a business hat, and I look at you from an IT leadership position. So the first myths that I'm trying to put forward in this conversation: does innovation need to start with the business, not with IT? So,
Oh,
what do you
okay.
think about it?
Well, that's a fun one. I have a lot of experience in the innovation space, and I very commonly came across this perspective that innovation has to start with the customer first, or has to start with the business first. And in my personal experience, I actually disagree. Disagree pretty vehemently. I think innovation can start anywhere. And I think technology is actually a wonderful place for innovation to start. And so I look forward to exploring this one with you and see where we land.
Right. So, one of the things that the business leaders, as we talk with a lot of people, they're not very sure about what is the technology going to bring as part of business value. And it seems to be that IT folks use a lot of jargons and acronyms that just throws them overboard. So, what do you think of that aspects? Do you think that IT is helping business to understand the real driver and value of these technologies in place?
That's a great point. I do think I agree with you that um, inside of the IT space, we tend to throw a lot of terms around that not everybody understands. We tend to talk about a lot of different technologies. We tend to use a tremendous amount of acronyms. And what that ends up doing is that ends up kind of isolating technology leaders from business leaders. And I do think it is critically important that when we as technology leaders get into a conversation with the business, that we are really trying to make sure that we're talking in business terms, in terms that are easily understood, that we're not using acronyms, We're not necessarily talking about technology. And it's actually, I think, one of the things that's really interesting about the space that you live in so much of the time, the BRM space, right? I view that BRM role as being a critical role towards taking individuals that may be leaning a little bit more towards technology speak, and then bringing them together with folks that may be focused on the financials or the business drivers of the organization. The BRM role really tries to bring those two roles together, which is a really important role within an organization. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in our conversation about innovation here in just a minute, though.
Right. In terms of the other aspect that gets really important for us to focus is a lot of the business leaders that we see today are not have not grown up the ranks in a technical order. So for a non-technical business leader, how does this ring a bell? We feel kind of thrown away from this stuff. So do you think there is a gap in terms of the IT knowledge, the awareness, and the trends, predominantly how we operate today? Or is there anything that you think that business leaders are catching up with what the IT trends and initiatives are being going around the world?
Well, I think I think it is something that business leaders are starting to get a lot more comfortable with. I'm seeing lots of indications of leaders, CEOs, unit presidents around the world in different companies that are saying things like, my company is no longer an insurance company. We're a technology company that just happens to sell um, insurance solutions, right? That was actually a quote from my prior CEO over at Nationwide. And so, and that wasn't the first time I heard a business leader articulate their business in today's day and age. I think digital transformation has really brought technology to the forefront. As we start to leverage technology to transform business models and client experiences in new and different ways, I think business leaders are having to get a lot more comfortable with the technology. And I think that's where I really come back to our conversation around innovation, right? I believe that emerging technology creates new what's possibles that inspire innovation ideas. I believe that when we look at new technologies like artificial intelligence or Internet of Things or blockchain, these technologies allow us to do things that we could never do before with technology, right? Augmented and virtual reality is another great example. We've never had that ability to put on a pair of glasses, look at a machine, and have contextual information appear in our line of sight around how to solve the problems for that machine. And so these technologies are creating new things that we can do, these new what's possibles. And I think that's where, for me, technology can now be an inspiration for innovation. And it's actually one of innovation can come from a lot of different places. I think coming from customers is a great source of innovation, but in today's digital world, technology is actually an incredibly fruitful source of information that is new and unique.
Right. And this is what one of the things when you talk about digital transformation and all these technologies, these are great. So I had this business leader went to a Gartner conference. They talked about the forecasting of all these technologies in place, what they could deliver, the level of reach and penetration. So they came to the IT shop and they said, okay, guys, we are going to do IoT and AI and blockchain. And people are just saying, okay, but what do you mean by that? So my question is that are IT stepping up the game to do more demand shaping, or we are trying to catch up on what's the new gig that Gartner or Forrester is predicting that we need to come up on to speed? Because the problem sometimes is the IT capability itself to fulfill the promise that leads to be a new shiny toy with that technology element that would be able to address these issues. But in reality, there is a level of capability gap that exists from what is being told or projected to what is in reality when it comes to implementing that technology.
Yeah, and I think this is where the BRMs can play a really important role, but all IT leaders can as well, right? When that CEO comes to you and says, we need to do IoT, and you ask that question of why do we need to do IoT? And the answer is, well, because Gartner said so, or because all my competitors are doing it, or because I'll fall behind if I don't. Those are not the right kinds of answers that we need. The answers are really have to be shaped in what does that technology allow us to do that we could never do before. IoT, for example, if we stick on that for a minute, allows us to get closer to the end customer experience. It allows us to collect sensor data in a way that we've never really had access to before. We can collect that data, we can bring that data back, or we can in fact sometimes process that data at the edge. And having access to that rich set of sensor data and new data about our customers actually helps us to better understand our customer experience. Because we can better understand our customer experience, we can react and respond faster. We can predict when something's bad is going to happen before it actually happens, rather than waiting for our customers to tell us. That's the new what's possible. The idea that you can predict what's happening in your customer environment before it happens and deliver value to your customer before they actually even know they need it. That's an incredibly inspiring idea. And that's what's possible with IoT. But you can't just come at it from a technology perspective. You have to come at it from that intersection between the inspiration from the technology and the business value you're going to drive in that transformation of either the client, the customer experience, or the transformation of your business model, or even internally the transformation of your operating model within your company and driving more productivity.
Right. And I think there's a fair point, Mike, in terms of how you look at that key aspect of intersection between these two parties and trying to bring it together as one team. So one of the things that I'm struggling as a business leader is IT coming up with real use cases for me to get that aha moment, to visualize what will be in store as you unravel this new box of innovation, because I'm still seeing this as a wrapper, and I'm trying to figure it out head and tail of how this will play a role of visualizing the new model that will evolve with these technologies. And how do you think IT leaders and IT architects will help us to position that business case much more concrete for everybody to have that shared understanding of the goal and what is the
Right.
possibility of these technologies?
Yeah, so let me give you a few examples that I've seen in my personal experience over the years of technology inspiring new potential innovation and new business use cases. Um, One that I saw from a former employer of mine, Procter and Gamble, they were inspired by IoT, Internet of Things, and they actually embedded sensors into a Braun toothbrush. Kind of crazy. You've got an IoT enabled toothbrush. What's the real business driver, the real business value there? Well, what they were able to do through those sensors is actually determine the health of your teeth in a different way, right? Your toothbrush was no longer just about brushing your teeth. It was actually about maintaining overall dental health. And so they could actually tell you more about what was going wrong based on the sensors that they have as you brush your teeth. So they took a thing that we all do every day, and they enabled it with some new technology that allowed a new what's possible. and they created an overall different customer experience for it that added significant value for the customer. So that's one example. Another example, when I was at Nationwide, we were exploring the home repair space. So Nationwide's a big home insurance company, and they were looking for ways that they could come alongside their home insurance customers and provide more benefit. And there were actually two different ideas that were inspired by technology to help Nationwide protect its homeowners. The first, again, was Internet of Things and that ability to predict bad things happening in your home. The biggest one and most noticeable one there is water damage. You could predict or sense when a leak happens and notify somebody so that something could be done about it before you have a $20,000 basement flood, right? So that was one, but another one that was really interesting was the inspiration of something as simple as video chat. They were inspired by video chat and cell phones, and then even the way that was brought into the medical community through teledocs. And Nationwide was actually inspired to create a brand new product that just actually launched in the Atlanta market recently called New, which is a DIY slash video chat enabled home repair utility. So you can actually pull up this product, you can point it at your washing machine that's on the fritz, and a repair specialist will use video chat and sensor data and other things to actually be able to tell you what's wrong with your washer and how to fix it. And so they'll give you the information so you can go fix it yourself, or they will actually come out and fix it for you if you need them to do that. So that was a really interesting new product, a business area that Nationwide had never been into before, that was really inspired and enabled by this what's possible that came out of video chat. And then I think the third one that I'll give you as an example of that I really like the potential for actually came out of an industry consortium in the insurance industry around blockchain. And blockchain is a technology that some of our audience may be familiar with. It's a technology that people are struggling with figuring out what to do with it. And I think the reason why people are struggling so much with it is because they're looking at it from a technology perspective and not from a perspective of what's possible. Now, the what's possibles that blockchain creates really are about enabling people to work together in new and different ways without the need for a central middleman, right? That's one of the key technology what's possibles. And so what happened in this consortium was they came up with the idea of the consortium's actually the Risk Stream Consortium. They came up with this idea of a mortality monitor. So in the life insurance industry, hard to believe, but one of the things that's really hard to do is know when someone has actually died, right? When someone has passed away, it may be several weeks, several months before the life insurance company actually finds out about that and can then validate it to ensure that there's no fraud or anything like that, and then actually pay the deceased's descendants the money that they're owed, right? So this consortium group used this new what's possible of blockchain to enable people to work together better, to come up with this mortality monitor. The idea that all of the different players in the life insurance industry, as well as other industries, could share their data on the blockchain. And when any one of those people find out that someone has passed away, they can share that data and notify everybody in the ecosystem. That way, people like an insurance company can proactively reach out to a wife or a mother whose child or whose husband might have died and deliver that check at a time when it's needed. versus making them go through all the pain and the hassle of delivering that. So that's just some idea, some examples of real technology inspired innovation that have done some really amazing things.
So the big $1 billion question. So do we understand, agree on this myth, or is it busted? So what's your thought?
The myth being innovation needs to start with a business, not with IT.
Yeah.
I think I've got to say that one's busted. How about you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'm totally convinced, Mike, with the real life use cases that we did. It is not imperative that the innovation has to start with business. It is actually more likely that IT is now becoming the center in a terms of technology focused innovation. So I think there is a fair play to give IT its fair degree of merit to prove its mettle to be innovative. So I agree that it is
Very
busted.
good. Busted.
Busted. Thank you so much, Mike, for this edition. And viewers, I hope you enjoyed the first IT Mythbusters, and keep your questions coming and tell us what are the other IT Mythbusters. And we will join you in the next edition and have more conversations on the next IT Mythbuster. Until then, stay safe, and signing off, Suresh
Thanks,
and
Suresh.
Mike.
Great
Thank you
stuff.
so much.